Good morning, and welcome to State of Indian Nations 2024. At this time, we ask you to please take your seats as our program is about to begin. Here to provide an honor song, please welcome Lance Fisher and Giovanna Gross to the stage. Lance Fisher is from the Northern Cheyenne Nation, and Giovanna Gross is from the Oglala Lakota Nation and Northern Peru. Together, they sing not only to preserve their indigenous languages, but to inspire our youth and celebrate the gift of life. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
E piva walnut, Lance Fisher, na hesheve, maheo nanako, na heshisive, na tsista. Nihoe moh matavas, na nakoe hotne heltsehe. Ne piva damano, na piva mota, hanahane. Good morning, my name is Lance Fisher. I'm from the Northern Cheyenne Tribe of Montana. My Cheyenne name translates to medicine bear.
Hello. Hello, my relatives. I shake your hand with a good heart. My name is Giovanna Gross. I'm from the Oglala Lakota Oyate, as well as the Northern Peruvian Nation. Lance will explain the song in just a minute here.
Today we're going to share a Cheyenne veteran song composed by Perry Little Coyote. The song talks about a man who went across the seas to protect and serve and earned the status of being called a warrior, and we're happy to see him return home. Yahweh, 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 na pavetano seheba wa mataitseo hey hey Yahweh 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 na pavetano seheba wa mataitseo hey Yahweh 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 Yashiman, Haho, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Executive Director of the National Congress of American Indians, Larry Wright, Jr. As a military veteran, former tribal chairman of the Ponca Tribe of Nebraska, and former Great Plains Area Vice President for the NCAI Executive Committee, his leadership and advocacy for tribal nations is unparalleled.
Aho, Ponkamase, Halashbahan, De Wanoke, Ijajek Diabli, Wishti Usni Ponkabli. Good morning, esteemed guests, dedicated leaders, and community members. It is with great honor that I welcome you to the 2024 State of the Indian Nations Address, held here for the first time at the Warner Theater here in our nation's capital. My name is Larry Wright, Jr., and I'm a citizen of the Ponca Tribe of Nebraska. It is with immense honor and privilege that I serve as the Executive Director of the National Congress of American Indians, the oldest, largest, and most representative American Indian and Alaska Native organization in the country. For 80 years, NCAI has served as a unifying force for Indian country, advocating for policies that uplift our people and working to ensure our voices are heard at every level of government. Our mission to protect and advance the rights and interests of tribal nations remains as critical today as it was at our founding. My role as Executive Director commits me to uphold this mission, ensuring that our collective efforts resonate not only within our communities, but across the halls of power, because that's where the decisions affecting our futures are being made. Today, we stand on the cusp of a new era. NCAI's 24th president, Mark Macarro, now in his 29th year as tribal chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians, will soon share a vision that promises to deepen our advocacy, strengthen our sovereignty, and enhance the prosperity of our tribal nations, highlighting NCAI's crucial role in shaping that future. In addition to President Macarro's address, we are honored to hear a congressional response delivered by United States Representative Mary Peltola, the first Alaska Native elected to Congress. Representative Peltola's response not only signifies the progress we have made in ensuring Native voices are represented at the highest levels of government, but the importance of our continued engagement in the political process. She will give insight as how we can continue to strengthen our nation-to-nation relationships and work together to address the challenges facing Indian country. We will also hear from the NCAI Youth Commission. As we come together today, bound by our shared history, culture, and aspirations, let us listen, learn, be challenged, and inspired by the words that we hear. And let us move forward together. Throughout today's event, I also invite everyone in the audience to join the conversation online. Use the official hashtag SOIN 2024 to share your insights, photos, reflections, and amplify our unified voices across social media platforms. And lastly, thank you for being part of this historic event. To our esteemed tribal leaders, government officials, partners, and allies, your presence here signifies the strength of our partnerships and the importance of our ongoing collaboration. NCAI will continue to stand at the forefront of advocacy for the rights and interests of tribal nations. Together, we are forging a future where every Native person can achieve their full potential, and tribal nations are recognized and respected as the sovereign entities that we are. Now it is with great honor that I welcome to the stage the 24th President of the National Congress of American Indians, Chairman Mark Macarro.
Just bring it down a bit. Meyuyam, Palovo Echnai, Meyuyam, no Kiyam, no Neshkinam, no Otnanum, Atwilam, Amayum, Bineshkinum, pi nek pi voktum pi payom kawachum. Non Mark Macarro yaka, pi kiktumi Macarro pi kengish, pi non pachanga wish pum toshka gati. Greetings everyone and good morning. My name is Mark Macarro of the Macarro and Ground Squirrel clans, and I'm the tribal chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians in California. I am privileged to live life alongside my extraordinary partner in this work, Holly Cook Macarro, and our kids, Hudson, Reg, our daughter Rebecca, and David. Holly and Reg are here today, somewhere there. And I thank the Pechanga Band of Indians, my people, Pechangayam. By resolution and goodwill, you wholeheartedly supported this endeavor for me to be NCAI president. Noshrona Pelek Lovika. All right? Pechanga. Welcome to the 2024 State of Indian Nations address. It's a privilege to serve as Indian country. It's a privilege to serve Indian country as president of the National Congress of American Indians. I strive to do so with humility and a desire to do right by our people. I also acknowledge the original people of this territory, the Anacostan Nation and the Piscataway Nation. We thank the Creator for bringing us here today. The wisdom and the values of our elders are the bedrocks of our communities, and the powerful voices of our youth in Indian country embolden the hope I have for all of us. To our Native veterans, thank you for your service. I'm honored to have some of our federal counterparts here today. These elected officials, political and judicial appointees, and their staff make decisions every day that directly impact our people. Let us also take a moment to breathe in the rich diversity and strength of our thriving tribal nations that are in this very room. I believe this is a moment for hope in Indian country. We continue to make strides in representation in everything from elected office to outer space, to what I believe will be a historic night at the Academy Awards next month. Let's go, Lily, right? The work always continues, but the state of Indian Nations is strong and on the rise. As I approach my time as NCAI president, I do so the same way I've approached the past nearly 30 years as tribal chairman, relying on the strength of our cultural foundations and inspiration drawn from my dad, Sonny. Like so many Native people of his generation, Sonny had a challenging life, but he carried a disposition that respected people and erred on the side of optimism. My dad was a state corrections officer at the youth training school in Chino, California. For 14 years, he worked with incarcerated young adults. Black and brown people were the majority population in that prison. I remember once, as a teenager who knew everything, asking how he could stand to be around these criminals every day, assuming they must all deserve to be there. He replied, "Son, you don't know what most of these people have gone through. Don't judge them on what might have been their worst decision and lowest point in their life." I took his wisdom to heart, as I've carried his words with me ever since. My dad was killed in the line of duty in 1988, chasing down an escaping prisoner. Now, I'm also a bird singer and a Quanish singer back at home. Like many of you, the songs that we sing at social gatherings and funerals teach us about our place in the world. Through our songs, I know the word for bison. In my language, for example, the word is uchanat. But there have not been bison in Southern California for thousands of years. We had a contract archaeologist in our valley who was dismissive of the possibility that bison had ever roamed Southern California. He called it a memory culture word. But isn't it interesting that whenever there's a construction project in our area, and that requires excavation that goes down more than 20 feet, they always find bison bones? What sounds more plausible? That my people made up a word for an animal that never lived among them? Or that my people date back in our part of the world to the Ice Age, and maybe as long as 2.5 million years ago? Our stories and histories continue to have much to offer everyone in this nation. Our songs tell us of a time on earth before the moon was in the sky. Indeed, we've been here an awful long, long time. And there's an unwavering spirit that has secured the strength of our communities today. We are the first Americans, and our tribal nations are the first governments. I am speaking today not only to Indian country, but to our fellow American citizens who increasingly turn to us for wisdom, collaboration, and solutions to our shared challenges. This beautiful theater is grand. This beautiful theater where we're gathered first opened 100 years ago in 1924, the same year Indians in this country gained American citizenship and the right to vote. But this theater doesn't look exactly the way it did in 1924, and neither does Indian country. Our communities continue to rebuild and reinforce our traditions and cultures and values. We've withstood the test of time. Long after this building is gone, we will still be here. So, while the Snyder Act was passed 100 years ago, barriers to the ballot remain and continue to be thrown up, which is why the bipartisan Native American Voting Rights Act, led by our Native American caucus, isn't just a bill that needs congressional approval. It's a tool that empowers our political voice and the Native vote. In 2024, the power of the Native vote holds the potential to swing elections and shape history, not just for Native people, but for everyone in the United States for generations. 2024 will be a pivotal year, but it's important to not just focus on this year in my first address as NCAI president. I want us to look out 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, because I want us to envision the legacy we intend to leave for our future. I believe that legacy will only happen if we continue the tradition set forth when NCAI was founded 80 years ago, a tradition of unity of purpose and action. Now, those who founded NCAI here in America's capital knew each tribal nation has its unique culture and that we are united by a common purpose, that a unified voice and collective action are the pathways to protecting and strengthening the sovereignty of our tribal nations. This wisdom transcends and connects generations. The power of our collective voice has never been more evident than it was last year in the historic way Indian country responded to the Brat King case. 486 tribal nations and 59 Native organizations were instrumental in supporting the constitutionality of the Indian Child Welfare Act. Yeah. People listened, the courts listened, and the United States listened. Together, tribal nations stood shoulder to shoulder to protect our children. This is the unity of collective action that propels us forward. It's our job to build on this legacy. Now, part of that legacy is continuing to tell the stories, especially the painful ones. Not to dwell on the trauma of the past, but to learn from it and to grow stronger from it. We draw our sense of service to our people from the most painful times in our histories. The sacrifices of our forebears challenge us in the present with a responsibility to carry our tribal identities forward. Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland has, let me say that again. Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland. I want to make sure we never take this moment for granted. Secretary Haaland has held and carried the stories of federal boarding schools that are cracking open the conversations of this era. We're grateful for all that she holds, and we must commit to continuing her work. We must keep telling those stories and continue to create safe places for people to share their stories so that we may add them to the mosaic of our history and prevent the invisibility of this and other traumatic times in our past. Just like that archaeologist who refused to believe that bison ever walked the land of my ancestors, we must make it impossible for future historians and archaeologists to ignore that what happened here in our lifetime. We must continue to tell our story. So, Part of the work before us for both Indian country and the three branches of federal government is to maximize the potential of our government-to-government relationship with an eye towards the sovereignty we've always had and the treaties that we're still expecting to be honored. We face a harsh reality. Recent court decisions have challenged the sovereignty of our people and disregarded core principles of our treaties. We grew comfortable knowing that some issues were settled law, but suddenly efforts are made to diminish our tribal sovereignty. How can our world so quickly be upended? The Castro Huerta decision is a glaring example. It illustrates how foundational legal understandings of U.S. tribal relations laid down over 2 centuries can so easily be reconsidered. Such rulings have reshaped and at times rewritten history to justify the outcomes that undermine our sovereign rights. It cannot be overstated how much a single justice can affect the lives of millions of people. Castro Huerta painfully highlighted a deep-seated misunderstanding of tribal sovereignty, whereas the Brackeen case saw our history and rights not just acknowledged, but respected. For now, there are no longer these linear fights where we battle, we win, and then on to the next one. Rather, they will keep coming at us. 50 years ago today, on this actual date, the Supreme Court issued the Bolt decision. Yeah. The Bolt decision was a huge win and a key ruling recognizing treaty-based hunting and fishing rights for our relatives in the Pacific Northwest. This stark difference between cases underscores the urgent need for a judiciary that understands and honors the principles of tribal sovereignty. As my old friend Billy Frank of the Nisqually Nation used to say, and he used to say this to me, little pull aside, quoting Billy Frank, "God damn it, Mark, we got to keep them from taking even one more slice of our tribal sovereignty. You can't let them do it." So, to ensure this, federal Indian law and the history of our government-to-government relations must be integral to legal education everywhere and mandatory on bar exams in all states. Now, we commend President Biden for nominating a historic number of Native Americans to the federal bench, and we thank the senators who led the vote in confirming these nominations. We have seen true champions within the halls of Congress in both chambers who deeply understand our communities and fight for our futures alongside us. Sharice Davids, Tom Cole, Mary Peltola, Josh Brackeen, and Mark Wayne Mullen. Yes. We honor and recognize your voices in the House and Senate. Congress must fulfill the promises made by the United States, promises that have been made, paid for, and are yet to be kept. Promises enshrined in treaties negotiated between nations, the supreme law of the land. We seek immediate action in crucial areas such as healthcare, housing, and the management of our lands and waters. Let me be clear, the well-being and the future of tribal nations should never be overshadowed by political agendas. Our needs and rights must rise above partisan politics. So, to that end, it is imperative that Congress make Indian Health Service funding mandatory and permanent. This is a crucial policy that will prevent the loss of Native lives due to political gridlocks and government shutdowns. We also call for long overdue reauthorization of the Native American Housing and Self-Determination Act to modernize the funding structures and address housing insecurity that disproportionately affects Native people. This is a bipartisan effort led by Brian Schatz and Lisa Murkowski of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. Congress must pass a farm bill that respects tribal sovereignty. It should facilitate expanded self-determination, recognize traditional conservation practices, and empower tribal nations to have greater control over their food systems. Our inherent sovereignty must be broadly recognized, including our authority to enforce laws within our own lands. Freeing us from dual taxation halts our economic growth. Indian country needs are not entitlements. Indian country's needs are non-negotiable, they are imperative, and they must be met. For years, tribal nations have been doing more with less, and often doing less with less. The government's own Broken Promises report demonstrates this. Well, no more. Adequate funding proportionate to our population size is not just expected, it is Congress's responsibility. Now, turning to the executive branch, I acknowledge the meaningful changes this administration has brought to Indian country. Under this presidency, there are more Native Americans in the highest levels of government than ever before, from the White House to so many agencies in government. We see you. This representation fosters a deeper understanding of our needs. Substantial efforts have been made to enhance government-to-government dialogue and to seek consultation with us. We've seen improvements in fee to trust processes, NAGPRA, and environmental standards. This administration has also worked with us to restore stewardship of our ancestral homelands. We saw that with the protection of Chaco Canyon and the establishment of nearly 200 co-stewardship and co-management agreements. And there was an executive order directly related to Indian country signed just 2 months ago, the first since the Clinton era, that promises to enhance our access to government funding, though its full impact remains to be seen. President Biden's commitment to improving justice and public safety in Indian country remains paramount, alongside the need to address the fentanyl and opioid epidemic. At the core of this effort is the need to bolster tribal criminal jurisdiction and increase law enforcement resources. We must be equipped to effectively confront and overcome the devastating consequences of this epidemic and save lives. And no discussion in Indian country would be complete without confronting a glaring injustice. After 49 years, the continued imprisonment of Leonard Peltier. Even the very prosecutors who put him there have now called for his release. This must be openly discussed and remedied immediately. As we continue in protecting our planet for future generations, it is critical that clean energy transitions, such as wind development and lithium mining, not infringe upon our sovereignty or our right to consent. Formal consultation with tribal nations is the key to ensuring these initiatives honor the deep connection to our lands and our waterways. This administration has set a powerful precedent, collaboration grounded in respect for sovereignty, fueled by Indian country's unified voice. So this work continues and requires our ongoing cooperation from both sides. So, Indian country, the time for action is now. I want to be clear that as NCAI President, I am unwavering in my commitment to shape this legacy. The path forward hinges on our collective choices. We must decide whether we'll falter in adversity or unite around shared aspirations around the strength that has defined us for generations. From successfully expanding tribal jurisdiction through the Violence Against Women's Act's reauthorizations, addressing the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous persons head-on, and dismantling stereotypes to protect our youth, NCAI has met its mission. This ongoing work to tackle immediate injustices has also built the foundation for our enduring empowerment. With this 80-year legacy behind us, I now call upon NCAI to amplify our collective voice to new heights. I have 3 key actions to announce. Today, we see over-policing in our urban Indian communities, and we see under-policing on our reservation lands. Indian country is 56 million acres in size, with a combined force of 3,000 officers. This means, as I speak these words, in many places on Turtle Island, A reservation of 1 or 2 million acres is being patrolled by 1 or 2 officers. In contrast, right here in DC, the U.S. Capitol complex is 270 acres with a force of 2,000 officers. Now, my good friend Darrell Seeke, chairman of the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians in northern Minnesota, has nearly worn out his voice telling the story of how their tribal community has been devastated by the opioid epidemic. In spite of repeated arrests of drug dealers, the tribe is hampered by limited tribal detention authority. The lack of prosecution by federal authorities means he sees the same offenders back in the community just days and literally sometimes hours later. He is desperate for the jurisdiction to prosecute these offenders and provide protection to his people. Now, the federal standard for officers is 2.4 officers per 1,000 people. The Oglala Sioux tribe is at 0.6 officers per 1,000 people. They have been forced to sue the United States based on the Bad Men Clause of the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty with the Oceti-Sakowin, which holds that the United States is responsible for the protection of tribal citizens, which is why my first call is for NCAI to host a National Public Safety and Justice Summit where we can engage in deep discussions about jurisdictional and law enforcement needs on all our tribal lands and address police brutality in our urban tribal communities. The injustices of over-policing and over-incarceration must be addressed and remedied. The chronic underfunding and under-resourcing of law enforcement on tribal lands needs to end. This conversation will also include the fentanyl and opioid crisis. The crisis knows no boundaries or borders, so our dialogue can't just include tribal leaders. It has to include also federal, state, county, and community leaders affected by this epidemic. Now, second, I'm announcing the formation of a task force within NCAI that will focus on the integrity of tribal membership and foster education and healing, tribal membership within NCAI. We're all aware of the constitutional amendment vote that happened at our last gathering. I want us to work through this in a respectful way. This is essential for uniting our voices and forging a legacy of unity and strength. And to our Alaska relatives, I recognize our unity as Indigenous people. Our partnership moving forward is critically important. We need to have an open dialogue of Alaska Native corporations, of the role of Alaska Native corporations, on the effect of climate change and rising sea temperatures on coastal communities and salmon viability, on policies around commercial fishing and salmon bycatch, and on transborder mining without environmental mitigation. Now, third, our collective and continued political engagement is crucial. Every vote we cast has the power to shape the future. I intend to convene a Native Vote Roundtable to ensure Indian country's voting voice is amplified and our access to the ballot is ensured. By the way, that's one of those things we all thought was settled, right? Our collective power resonates when we actively engage, we raise our voices, and advocate alongside each other. Through these calls to action, NCAI can and will continue to champion the rights and needs of tribal nations. So, in closing, with NCAI, we must remember our mission. We are here to protect treaty rights and our languages and our cultures and improve the quality of life for all of our tribal communities. We are a deliberative body. We are a Congress that uses resolutions to speak with one voice after hearing discussion and viewpoints from our delegates all over Indian country. There's a lot going on in the world and many strong opinions on them. I personally recognize the struggles of communities who've experienced displacement and land loss, and I condemn acts of genocide and terrorism. On this stage as president of NCAI, I am committed to working within our deliberative processes to speak as a unified voice on all matters. And finally, envisioning the legacy that we forge for our future will guide my tenure as president of the NCAI. I want that legacy to mirror the endurance of our spirit, the resilience of our cultures, the strength that has defined our people for millennia. We're empowered and we're energized. Our legacy remains strong for decades to come. To justice in all its forms, and may the Creator watch over all of us. Thank you. Nafrona Plovik, Chon Hichaloviman, Tapich Panotela Poeko. Lovika.
Thank you, President Macarro, for your insightful and inspiring address. Your leadership and dedication to the sovereignty, justice, and community well-being of tribal nations set a strong foundation for the work that we will continue to undertake together. As we transition from reflecting on the state of our nations to envisioning the path forward, it is my honor to introduce a groundbreaking leader who embodies the spirit of progress and representation for our people in the halls of Congress. Making history as the first Alaska Native elected to Congress and addressing the NCAI for the first time. Please join me in welcoming United States Representative Mary Peltola to provide today's congressional response.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation to give this response today. I'm so grateful to God for gathering us all here in this space to learn and grow with each other. We are truly blessed to have this opportunity and the energy to make change and to chart a strong course forward as Native people. If you would have told me just 2 years ago that I'd be giving the congressional response to NCAI's State of the Indian Nation address, I would not have believed it. I have come so far only because of the hard work and striving of generations of my ancestors who came before. Every one of you in this room bears a piece of that success. Since I arrived in DC, so many people have told me how inspirational my story has been to them from all corners of the country. As grateful as that makes me, it can also feel like a lot to live up to. I'm only one person, and there's so much work to be done. In moments like those, I remember why I'm here. It's not because I can fix everything alone, but because there are many people who are counting on me to make their voices heard. And I know I'm not alone because there are people like you out there with me. As I respond to the state of Indian nations, I think it's worth reflecting on the successes that our work has already achieved. Native people have accomplished so much in recent years through determination and cooperation. We've placed discussion of tribal management, traditional knowledge, and sovereignty into the lexicon and procedures of government. We have begun to co-manage federal lands across the country. We've continued to elect members of Congress, and we are only beginning to find our full strength. These victories should inspire us for the work that lies ahead, because there's so much to be done and significant challenges in our path that we will only be able to tackle together. I applaud President Macarro's speech and particularly its focus on justice, sovereignty, and commitment to our communities. I'd like to discuss each of these issues. Justice. I was grateful to hear President Macarro's call for a National Public Safety and Justice Summit. This is a dire need for so many of our communities, and I'd be happy to attend and assist as my office and I are able. From the proliferation of fentanyl and opioids across our communities to the arbitrary, frustrating limitations of tribal law enforcement and the ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people. We are facing too many threats to our lives and livelihoods on a daily basis. My state knows these challenges firsthand. Fentanyl has found its way even to some of our most remote Alaskan communities where all goods have to be flown in or barged. Everywhere these drugs go, they wreak havoc on our families and on our underfunded, overburdened health and public safety systems. We need a coordinated national response, which is why I'm proud to be a supporter of the Combating Fentanyl Poisoning Act of 2023. This bill would authorize grant programs to combat fentanyl poisonings, but it is only one part of the solution. We need to control our border and the drugs flowing in from other countries, and we need to invest in education, workforce, and healthcare systems to provide pathways away from drugs. As President Macarro said, however, justice is not merely about crime and enforcement. If we could stop the flow of fentanyl tomorrow, we would be safer. But that alone would not be justice. True justice is a state of relationships and balance between people that must be achieved and maintained through deliberate effort and governance. Native people have been denied justice, parity, and equitable opportunities for too long in too many areas. Alaska's legendary former Representative Don Young knew this well and was a champion for Native people in so many ways. I've been grateful for the chance to carry the torch, pursuing priorities like the Indian Program's Advance Appropriation Act, which would provide guaranteed funding in advance for the Indian Health Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and Bureau of Indian Education. Advance funding is something that most other departments already enjoy. It's essential for maintaining programs that can reliably serve our people. We need access to the same tools as everyone else to build functioning communities. That is justice in its most basic sense. Further, Congress must gain an understanding that Native people are not just another identity group. We are sovereign nations. That word, sovereignty, is so important. Sovereignty is a recognition of how we have always been Native people, self-governing and self-sufficient. But it is not prescriptive. There's not one specific Native way to be sovereign that all of us must practice. We are sovereign because of who we are, not because of how we organize. That is something that I think we all need to remember because it is crucial to our unity. Alaska has a unique system of sovereignty and self-determination that doesn't always fit into programs designed for the lower 48. I know our Native corporations and tribal consortiums can seem different or odd at first glance, but they are merely another way of addressing the same needs that all of our communities possess. Though we each have a responsibility to our own tribal nations, we also bear a responsibility to look out for our collective interests as Native people. Treaty or non-treaty, Alaska Native Corporation shareholder or non-shareholder, urban Native or villager, we are all Native. That should be a source of strength, not wedges to divide us. We're all subject to the plenary powers of Congress, a place where we are all too often misunderstood. It's a place accustomed to dealing with people as special interest groups, where every program and federal resource is treated as finite. This model tries to place our needs in competition with each other, and as a result, our communities suffer. I firmly believe that the only way we can truly address the systemic issues our communities face is by demanding more, not asking to exclude others from our perceived share. We need to be focused on growing the pie, raising the top line, creating more opportunity for everyone. Our ancestors recognized that no one was coming to save them. They worked together to survive. They knew that what benefited one of us could benefit all of us. In the same way, no one is coming to save us today. We still have to work together to thrive. There's no better example of this than the Native American Voting Rights Act, a badly needed piece of legislation that will better enfranchise many of our communities and enable us to truly act as the sovereign entities we are. But it is currently stuck in this Congress because it does not have a Republican co-sponsor. I'm working hard to make this a bipartisan bill, but we need the full might of our collective action to break through this gridlock. After seeing firsthand how partisanship and political tribalism has affected Congress, I hope that we do not fall into the same trap. This is where I see NCAI's role so clearly. This is the National Congress of American Indians. This is the place where we can speak with one voice, where we can support one another and lift each other up. If we let arguments over sovereignty be used to degrade one another, we degrade the power of that term and limit our power to demand change. I am glad to hear about the proposal for an internal NCAI task force to discuss our direction. This is a critical step, an opportunity to come together, heal, and unify. As NCAI undertakes this effort, I merely ask that the task force be representative and inclusive of all regions, all peoples, and all tribes. It is the only way to truly represent our communities. At the end of the day, that's why all of us are here, to improve the quality of life for our communities. We have seen the failures of Congress to meet its obligations and provide for our people too many times. We're all painfully aware of the needs our communities have, needs that continue to shock my colleagues here when I relay them. In my state, 32 communities are without basic water and sewer infrastructure. Many more have unreliable or untreated systems. Houses are old and worn and frequently overcrowded. Across Alaska, a state which would stretch from Jacksonville to San Francisco if laid upon a map of the lower 48, are remote communities without the means or authority to protect themselves, who must sometimes wait days for law enforcement to arrive via boats or planes. These are not just issues of safety and health, they're issues of basic human dignity. No one should be expected to endure these conditions. They will not be solved by mere scraps of federal funding. Our needs must be the foundation for our collective action. Our pie deserves to get bigger. The top line must be grown, and it can be. It just takes all of us. I know that unity is not a new idea. President Macarro was right to speak so much about it. Unity is an idea that has to be actively encouraged by our leaders and practiced at every level of our organizations. That means we all need to step it up in our communities. There will never be enough Native people in our courts or in Congress until we decide that we are willing to put ourselves there. We need to get all of our people involved, engaged, and yes, running for office. I ran because I knew that someone needed to stand up for our fish. It was truly as simple as that. Being pro-fish isn't just a slogan to me, it's a way of life. Where I'm from, on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, our babies teethe on dried salmon strips. Salmon is our first solid food. It's our most basic and essential sustenance, both physically and culturally. I know there are issues like this that you all care deeply about as well, issues unique and significant to your communities and histories. These are the issues that can be hard to convince Congress to care about when it's just one person or one tribe speaking about the issues that affect them. But when we unify to elect candidates that can speak with a single loud voice, it makes a difference. People are starting to pay attention to fish now. This administration just issued one of the most significant executive orders on fishing in our nation's history to crack down on imports from foreign trawl fleets that are damaging our oceans and discarding fish by the thousands. NOAA is looking at revising our national fisheries regulations for the first time in a decade. All of this happened because Alaska Natives were unified. We showed up to vote as a community. I know that many of you have done this in your own communities as well. We all know that it works. We just need to be willing to do it at the highest level. It's been the honor of my life to serve in this seat and to advocate for Alaska and Native people. I also believe the state of Indian nations is strong, but we are still far from realizing our true strength. I want to be a partner with all of you to help us find it, but we need more than just me. I look forward to the day where we are represented in true proportion. I look forward to the day where resources are more justly allocated, where sovereignty and self-determination is respected by all, and where our communities are put first. I know we can get there, and I look forward to speaking with many of you later this week on more important issues to our people. The conversation is only beginning. Oyana.
Thank you, Representative Peltola, for joining us today. As an ally on Capitol Hill and a trailblazer for all of Indian country, we appreciate your partnership, and we are excited to have you join us later this week during ECWS. Next, please join me in welcoming to the stage NCAI Youth Commission co-presidents, Caleb Dash, a citizen of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Committee, and Yananawi Logan, Deer Clan from the Seneca Nation of Indians.
Hello, I'm thankful you are all well. My name is Yananawi Logan. It translates to She Guards the Corn. I'm Deer Clan of the Seneca Nation. I'm the daughter of Leslie Logan and the late Brad Bonaparte of the Akwesasne Mohawk. I serve as the co-president of the NCAI Youth Commission.
Shapgaich, Banyichiri, Caleb Dash, Ayanam Jud, Anakima Atam, Chahalachitam Pipas Juvat. Hello everyone, my name is Caleb Dash and I come from the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community in Arizona, and I serve as the co-president of the NCAI Youth Commission. 21 years and 5 months ago, I came into this world not knowing anything but learning from my family how to walk, talk, and learn. Here I am now, still learning and growing with each passing day, not knowing what the future holds. Although I am 21, I feel the pains and burdens of living in the 21st century and the struggle Native people continue to face from the federal government and within our nations. For example, there are approximately 9.7 million American Indians that inhabit the United States. 75% of American Indians graduate from high school. 56% of American Indians are homeowners. 75% of reported suicide rates from American Indians were under the age of 44. Murder is the third leading cause of death for American Indian women, which is 10 times higher than that of all other ethnicities. These statistics are the world we live in. They are what we as natives have to go through daily. We want the best for our communities, families, and friends. But we must receive more funding from the federal government to support all our nations in efforts to build infrastructure that is vitally needed, such as roads, hospitals, gas stations, schools, fire departments, and so much more. As Indigenous people, we are neglected by the federal government and also put at the far end of the table. Growing up, my only fear as a child was losing my family. Now that I am much older, I have more, such as losing my culture, language, and even that great fear only we as Native people can relate to, and that is losing our tribal sovereignty. We call upon the United States of America to address our concerns for the funding allocations needed in Indian country and necessary infrastructure, as well as the protection of Indian territories. In doing so, we need to cooperate more for the safety and security of both our people and the world, conserving and preserving the beauty of our lands and making a more sustainable planet for generations to come. It is not only the duty of our people to protect our lands, but that of those who have taken our lands and now inhabit them. We ask the United States government to acknowledge on the record the genocide of our people and the malcontent the United States has kept as they continue to attack our freedom and our nations in efforts to destroy our ways of life. That said, and being a voice of the youth, we also want to invite tribal nations to ask the United States government to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. It is up to us to continue. It is up to us to continue to preserve and defend our people and help those around the world, because if it were happening here, I'd want as much help as possible from my family. As people of the world, we know that what is happening worldwide also impacts us, and it is our job to help those in need. Lastly, I want to share a story. It was a few years ago when I was a Boy Scout. I had some friends, we got along, joke here and there, just like any other. But one day while we're out camping at one of the scout camps, one of my friends, we'll call him Joe, and another one of my friends, we'll call him John. They were both talking behind me and a few others, but when we heard a scream behind us, we looked back and we saw my friend Joe hitting our friend John with a rock. We later discovered that behind us, they were making fun of each other when it went too far. Joe was a child and a product of group homes and had many difficulties controlling his emotions. Our other friend, the provocator, was not, but we all knew that sometimes he teased too much, and inevitably, it was a powder keg between them. Fortunately, after hearing our friend's screams, we tackled Joe, and afterwards, another friend and I ran for help while the rest watched over our two friends. When we got help, we immediately took our friend, who was beaten, to a helicopter landing zone to get him to a hospital. We were never the same. Our friend lost his memory and forgot about us, while the other went through the juvenile justice system, and we never saw him again. The reason I bring this story up is to remind everyone here who knows the pains of youthfulness, going through things, whether it be bullying, parental issues, drugs, alcohol, suicide, and so much more. We have a significant problem that we all know. I believe that it begins with our families. They may not be the best, but we must improve and care for one another. The roots of our problems are, yes, in our families, but also in the financial hardships that we have taken through the subjugation of our tribes from centuries of colonization and oppression. We must return to our old ways of living, caring for one another, watching over each other, and helping one another. Whenever my grandparents would tell me stories from back in their day, they'd always tell me how kind people were to one another, whether it be waving at each other at stop signs, watching each other's kids, or helping each other through addictions and building homes together. It is what we need to do. Always remember to be kind and live like it's your last day, because we do not know what the future holds. So make the most of it now and create a future for us that is sustainable, prosperous, and beautiful. That's all.
I stand before you today with a profound sense of responsibility and a deep commitment to shedding light on a critical and often overlooked matter, the state of Indigenous youth. The young people of Indian country have strong convictions and passionate voices, yet our messages are often ignored and diminished. The tapestry of Native American youth is woven with both the memory of our land and ancestors and the stark realities of contemporary life in America. My duty as co-president of the National Congress of American Indians Youth Commission and a youth leader is to ensure that our collective message is heard and our priorities reverberate across the waters and lands of Indian country. A few weeks ago, I returned from a study abroad program in Ecuador, a once peaceful country strafed by terrorism and internal war. As my family anxiously worried and awaited the safe return of their young Onondaga daughter, my worry was focused on the indigenous communities I was safely departing. Amid a national crisis marked by drug exploitation seeping into their borders, these communities, scarred by negative media depictions of their country, struggle to sustain the ecotourism industry. Many communities have invested generations of land, labor, and financial resources in ecotourism as a critical part of their economy. This is just one challenge facing indigenous peoples around the world. Native youth are committed to tackling the issues and challenges in Indian country, but our conscience and concerns are not narrow. Our focus is expansive and global. Native youth care deeply and give space, time, and support to the collective and mutual liberation of oppressed indigenous people worldwide. Our generation is devoting our time, attention, and resources to ending the genocide in Gaza, where the death toll has risen to 28,000 Palestinians, half of whom are youth. Beyond social media posts, Indigenous youth have facilitated a community of solidarity, organizing protests, fundraisers, hunger strikes, and healing circles for the cause. As Native and Indigenous youth, we are told time and time again by our community and tribal leaders, use your voice, use your platform, have convictions, and support important causes. Some might claim that the youth don't care, that their phones and trivial pursuits consume them, but I'm here to tell you we are not disaffected, indifferent, or incapable. We cannot remain silent or pay no heed to the massacre in Gaza when our ancestors suffered a similar genocide. And whether experienced in our past or we see the actual happening here, genocide is genocide, and it should always be condemned. We Indigenous youth are compelled to support this important cause by speaking out and calling attention to genocide, a shared horror that is a central part to our painful history. In the Clinton-Sullivan Scorched Earth campaign, our villages and crops were burned, women and children were killed, and the Haudenosaunee were removed from our ancestral homelands. In the Oka crisis of 1990, the Canadian government denied the Gunyat-Gahaga human rights, and violence ensued over 78 days. The Osage Reign of Terror continues today while they fight for mineral rights and the ongoing consequences of loss of land and rights to non-natives. Tourism in Hawaii has displaced Native Hawaiians and destroyed natural resources, contributing to the Maui wildfires that have devastated the Native communities. We are not just familiar with what we see unfolding in Gaza, the forced displacement, extraction of resources, demolition of culture and demonization of our identities, and the raping and murdering of our people. It is a part of us, historically through our ancestors and presently through our traumas, through stories of such atrocities. The reinstallation and prioritization of our cultural practices and resources are necessary for breaking down systems of oppression and exploitation. Youth recognize that. I am proud of my cousins who have committed their lives to language on the Tonawanda Seneca territory and are actively preserving oral traditions. Our youth are closing the generational gap from a time when our people were shamed and abused for speaking their language in the Indian residential schools. We know the power of our language because without it, we lose our climate solutions, our stories, and ourselves as Ongohoe. As a mark of respect to Black History Month, we revisit Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s sentiments recently posted by NCAI in support of the relentless fight for shared justice and equality, transcending racial boundaries that continue to inspire much of modern-day advocacy for Native rights. As mentioned, NCAI remains dedicated to championing his dream of a more just and equitable world. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminds us that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. While NCAI prioritizes issues at home, there remains a responsibility to oppose glaring injustices and human rights violations. NCAI defends sovereignty and seeks to protect rights and advocate for the needs of tribal communities. The very mission of NCAI is to uphold and support Indigenous peoples collectively. Let us move on from when it was easier to remain in an echo chamber's safe and comfortable confines and become more aware of the issues beyond our backyard. Our advocacy must go beyond Turtle Island, even when our calls to action become uncomfortable and hard to swallow. I'm not here to speak on issues we are all too familiar with. We all know the needs of the communities we come from, and we are all aware of the solutions we need for a future our ancestors dreamed of. I am here to challenge those of you who can relate to dig deep, because that's where the real solidarity work comes in. That's what it means to be a good relative. In compliance with the press release published by the Center for Native American Youth, we ask Congress to pass legislation calling for a permanent ceasefire and an end to U.S. military aid to Israel. This includes introducing or supporting legislation such as House Resolution 786, which calls for a ceasefire in Palestine. The restoration of clean and running water, fuel, medical supplies, and humanitarian aid to Gaza. The protection of doctors, nurses, medical staff, and Palestinian journalists. The protection of students advocating for Palestinian liberation at colleges and universities nationwide. From Indian country, our Native youth demand. Tribal leaders call for a ceasefire through resolutions like that of the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians. Native organizations must withdraw from sponsorships that companies that are actively funding genocide. Indian country must give space for global issues of systemic oppression. Being indigenous to this land, we are still healing from genocide that was inflicted on our more than 500 communities in countless ways and justified by the church, divine power, law, and policy. Through grief and trauma, we are abundantly mindful of our history and our ancestors' sacrifices to hold on to land, culture, and our people. We know that the journey to liberation is not easy or comfortable. The first step toward global liberation is to extend our allyship, to be good relatives beyond Turtle Island. This we know. A bundle of arrows tied together cannot be broken. Together, let us ignite a conversation that transcends rhetoric and transforms into a meaningful action that uplift, empower, and amplify the voices of Indigenous youth domestically and around the world. Yahweh, thank you.
Thank you, Co-President Dash and Co-President Logan. As we draw close to the end of today's historic gathering, I extend my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you for being here, making the effort to be here at this 2024 State of Indian Nations. Thank you for standing with us, for sharing this journey, and for your unwavering dedication to Indian country. On behalf of the NCAI, we look forward to seeing you this week throughout the conference. Safe travels.